They told me to leave.
You don't belong here, the woman in the black Chanel dress hissed, her diamond earrings catching the light of the funeral home chandelier. This is a private ceremony for family and friends. Not for people like you. I looked down at my worn-out jacket, the same one I'd slept in for the past 3 winters on the streets of Manhattan. My shoes had holes in them. My hair was long and unkempt. I probably smelled like the subway station where I'd washed my face that morning. But I wasn't leaving. Because the man in that casket was my friend. The only real friend I'd had in 15 years. My name is Marcus Cole. And this is the story of how I went from singing for quarters on a street corner to inheriting $18 million from a man whose family didn't even know I existed. It all started 5 years ago, on the coldest January night I can remember. I wasn't always homeless. There was a time when I was Professor Marcus Cole, teaching music theory at a community college in Brooklyn.
I had an apartment, a car, a life.
Then my wife Sarah got sick.
Stage 4 cancer.
The medical bills came like an avalanche. Our insurance covered almost nothing. I sold everything we owned.
The car went first. Then the furniture. Then the apartment itself.
When Sarah died, I died with her. Not physically. But everything inside me that made me Marcus, that was gone. I stopped going to work. Lost my job. Ended up on the streets. And that's where I stayed for 15 years. The only thing I kept from my old life was my voice. I could still sing. So that's what I did. I'd stand on the corner of 42nd and Broadway, near the theater district, and I'd sing for whatever people would throw in my cup. Most days, I'd make maybe $20.
Enough for food.
Sometimes a cheap motel room if I was lucky. It was January 17th. I remember because it was Sarah's birthday. I was singing Amazing Grace, her favorite song, when an older man in an expensive coat stopped.
He didn't throw money in my cup. He just stood there, listening.
When I finished, he spoke. That was beautiful. Really beautiful.
His voice was kind. Not pitying. Just genuine.
Thank you, sir, I said, expecting him to walk away like everyone else. Instead, he sat down on the bench next to me. On a freezing January night, this man in his $1,000 coat sat on a dirty bench next to a homeless man. I'm Richard, he said, extending his hand. I shook it, confused.
Marcus. You have a gift, Marcus.
That voice, where did you train?
Juilliard, I said quietly. Long time ago. Different life. Richard smiled. Juilliard. I knew it.
I can always tell. We talked for 2 hours that night. About music.
About life. About loss.
He told me about his wife who'd passed away 3 years before.
I told him about Sarah.
He didn't ask why I was homeless. He didn't offer me money or pity.
He just saw me. As a person.
Not as a problem to be solved or avoided. Before he left, he said, I'll be back tomorrow.
Same time.
If you'll sing for me again.
And he did come back. And the next night. And the next.
For 5 years, Richard Thompson came to that corner 3 times a week. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
Like clockwork.
He'd sit on that bench, and I'd sing. Sometimes we'd talk for hours. Sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence. I learned he was Richard Thompson.
The Richard Thompson.
Founder of Thompson Industries.
Billionaire.
One of the wealthiest men in New York.
But to me, he was just Richard. The man who listened. Who cared.
Who saw Marcus Cole the person, not Marcus Cole the homeless man. He never offered me money directly. I think he knew I'd refuse out of pride. But he'd always accidentally leave an envelope on the bench. Oh, I must have dropped this, he'd say with a wink. Inside would be $100.
Sometimes more.
Never less than what would get me through the week comfortably. Why do you do this? I asked him once, in our 3rd year of friendship.
Do what? Come here.
Spend time with someone like me. Richard looked at me seriously. Marcus, you're the only person in my life who wants nothing from me. Everyone else wants my money, my influence, my name. You just want to sing and talk about Chopin. That's priceless to me. He paused, then added, and you remind me that wealth isn't what you own. It's what you give. Last month, Richard didn't show up on Tuesday.
I wasn't too worried.
Sometimes he traveled for business.
Thursday came.
No Richard. Saturday. Still nothing. By the following Tuesday, I was worried. This had never happened in 5 years. I did something I'd never done before. I went to the public library and Googled his name. The headline made my world stop. Billionaire Richard Thompson dies at 73. Funeral Friday at Morrison Funeral Home. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest.
Richard was gone. My friend.
The man who'd spent 5 years treating me like a human being when the world treated me like trash. I sat in that library and cried. The librarian didn't even ask me to leave. I knew I had to go to his funeral. I had to say goodbye. But I also knew what would happen. His family, his society friends, they didn't know I existed. Richard had kept our friendship private, I think to protect me from judgment. I spent my entire week's money on a haircut and shave at a cheap barbershop. I washed my clothes in a laundromat. I tried to look as presentable as a homeless man can look. Friday morning, I walked into Morrison Funeral Home. The funeral home was filled with New York's elite.
Expensive suits.
Designer dresses. The smell of costly perfume mixing with flowers. I slipped in quietly and sat in the back row. Richard lay in an open casket at the front. Even from the back, I could see him.
My friend. Gone.
I'd been sitting there for maybe 5 minutes when I felt a hand on my shoulder.
Excuse me. A woman's voice, cold and sharp.
This is a private ceremony.
I turned.
She was maybe 50, wearing head-to-toe designer clothes.
Richard's daughter, I realized.
I'd seen her in photos Richard showed me. I'm just here to pay respects, I said quietly. Do you have an invitation?
No, but... Then you need to leave. Now. Her voice got louder. People started turning around.
Your father was my friend, I said, standing up. She looked me up and down with disgust. My father didn't have homeless friends. You're probably here hoping to steal something. Security. 2 large men in suits started walking toward me. Please, I said, my voice cracking. I just want to say goodbye to Richard.
We were friends. For 5 years.
He came to see me 3 times a week. Richard's son joined his sister.
That's impossible. Our father was a busy man.
He didn't have time for street people. The security guards grabbed my arms.
Wait.
I said desperately.
Let me sing for him. Just one song. That's all I ask. Then I'll leave.
Richard's daughter laughed.
Actually laughed. Oh, this is rich.
The homeless man wants to perform.
This isn't a concert hall.
It's our father's funeral. But then another voice spoke. Quiet but firm. Let him sing. An older man in a black suit stepped forward. I later learned he was Martin Phillips, Richard's lawyer and oldest friend.
Excuse me.
Richard's daughter turned on him.
I said let him sing, Martin repeated.
Your father left specific instructions. If a man named Marcus Cole showed up at his funeral, he was to be allowed to sing. The room went completely silent.
Richard had known. Somehow, he'd known I'd come.
The security guards released me, confused. I walked slowly to the front of the room, past rows of shocked faces. My hands were shaking. I stood next to Richard's casket and looked down at him one last time.
This is for you, my friend, I whispered.
Then I began to sing Amazing Grace. My voice, which had survived 15 years on the streets, filled that funeral home. I closed my eyes and sang every note like it was the last thing I'd ever do. I sang for Richard.
For our friendship.
For the man who saw me when everyone else looked away. When I finished, the room was absolutely silent. I opened my eyes. Half the people in the room were crying. Even Richard's daughter had tears streaming down her face. After the service, as people were leaving, Martin Phillips approached me.
Marcus Cole? He asked. Yes, sir.
I need you to stay. For the reading of the will.
I don't understand. You will.
Richard's family protested loudly. Why is he staying? He's not family.
Martin's voice was ice.
Because your father requested it. Now please everyone take a seat. We gathered in a private room. Richard's 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and me. The homeless man in the worn-out jacket. Martin opened the will and began to read. Most of it was standard. Properties, investments, charitable foundations. Richard's children would inherit the business. Then Martin got to a section that made everyone lean forward. And to Marcus Cole, Martin read, his voice thick with emotion, the man who showed me that humanity costs nothing and means everything. I leave 40% of my liquid assets, totaling approximately $18 million.
The room exploded. What? That's impossible.
We'll contest this. But Martin held up a hand and continued reading.
A letter. From Richard. To me.
Martin's voice shook as he read. Dear Marcus. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if I know you, which I do, you came to my funeral even though you knew you'd be unwelcome. That's the kind of man you are. For 5 years, you gave me something my billions couldn't buy. You saw me as Richard, not Richard Thompson the billionaire. You wanted nothing from me except conversation and friendship. In a world where everyone wanted something, you just wanted to sing. You told me once that you'd lost everything when Sarah died. I understood that. When Margaret died, I lost myself too. But you helped me find joy again. In music. In simple conversations. In just being present. My children will contest this will. They'll say you manipulated me, tricked me, used me. But you and I know the truth. You never asked me for a single dollar. I had to leave it on the bench like I'd forgotten it. You sang for quarters when you were worth millions in talent and character.
The money is yours.
Not because you need it, though I hope it helps. But because you taught me what wealth really means. It's not what we keep. It's what we give to those who would never ask for it. You sang for me in life. You'll sing for me at my funeral. And now my final gift, sing for yourself. Remember your wife. Remember your music. Remember that Marcus Cole, the real Marcus Cole, is still in there.
Thank you, my friend.
For 5 years of humanity.
Richard. The will was ironclad.
Richard's children tried to contest it, but Richard had prepared for that. Video testimonials. Documented proof of our friendship. Letters he'd written to his lawyer describing our conversations. 3 months later, $18 million was deposited in a bank account I'd never had.
I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy fancy cars.
The first thing I did was buy a small apartment.
Just 1 bedroom. That's all I needed.
The second thing I did was start the Sarah Cole Foundation for Music Education. Free music lessons for underprivileged kids. Sarah would have loved that. I teach music now.
To kids who can't afford it.
And 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I go back to that corner on 42nd and Broadway.
But I don't sing for money anymore. I sing for free.
For anyone who needs to hear it. Sometimes I look at the empty bench where Richard used to sit, and I swear I can feel him there.
Listening. Smiling.
He taught me something I'll never forget. Wealth isn't what you own. It's what you give. And kindness isn't transactional. Sometimes it compounds in ways you never expect. Richard Thompson gave me $18 million. But the real gift was 5 years of friendship.
I was a homeless man. He was a billionaire. And somehow, against all odds, we became friends.
That's worth more than any inheritance. If you're watching this and you see someone struggling, homeless, alone, invisible, take 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes. Sit with them. See them. Listen to them.
You might not change their life. But you might save it. Richard saved mine. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, please share it.
Not for me.
But for all the people like I was, singing on street corners, hoping someone will stop and listen.